Please welcome back Christopher Johnson.
As I said before, I taught in several places and overseas. And when I came back from Japan, I had an international. I was teaching at an international school in Kobe, Japan. When we got back, I didn't have a job, and I needed one, but getting a teaching job is not always easy. So I started volunteering in my son Dylan's school. And I thought, okay, this would be a way to break in and get into that level and that school, and it seemed to work because there was an opening for a position at the school that Dylan was at, and so I submitted my resume and I sat down with the principal, and he looked at my resume, but then he said, "You're Dylan's dad, right?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, he's in first grade, right?" And I said, "Yeah." "And he's doing really well, isn't he?" And I said, "Yeah. He's above grade level in reading, math, all that stuff." And I said, "Yeah, we're real proud of him." Well, he says, "Well, then you're a good risk." You have a job. And my job consisted of several parts. What I did was, I first started out with a job as a volunteer coordinator in the library for a kindergarten reading program, which was kind of cool because kids got to learn to read with caring adults in the library. They'd show in, they'd read with the kids, and then the kids would read back to them, and then they'd take a book home, and then they'd read it at home, and take it back. And so, but we had depended on volunteers to get this thing done. And I was new, and I wanted to prove my mettle that I was going to be a good volunteer organizer. So I managed to get one couple to add to our volunteer list. It was an elderly couple that lived in the neighborhood, and I was excited. And they came on their first day, and things were seeming to go pretty well. And then I noticed the man was not exactly well. He was kind of turning white, and he was kind of faltering a little bit. And then his wife came up to me and says, I think my husband's having a heart attack." And so I called 911, and about the same time as the EMTs arrived, so did the principal. And the principal was not happy that my first job as a volunteer coordinator, I got somebody that was going to die. But he didn't die. Everything was cool. We got him out, and after that, I managed to get some other volunteers, much younger, and it was good. The second part of my job was to teach third grade accelerated math. Now, on the face of that, it's not a big deal. And we got third graders that finished the third grade curriculum, and I just teach them fourth grade math. Okay, I can do that. I've been teaching first grade for 10 years. I can jump up to fourth grade, no problem. But the last part, the third part of my job was probably the toughest one. And this is the one that gave me nightmares at night because I had to teach sixth grade pre-algebra. We all know that algebra is that super useful, mystical math thing that combines numbers and letters and symbols, and they make no sense at all. And I didn't know how I was going to do this, and I was sitting at home and I watched an episode of The Simpsons, and I went, aha, that's it. Marge Simpson was teaching piano, and her method was to memorize the day's lesson before that night, and then just fake it in front of the kids for the whole time. I said, I could do that, and I did, but not very well. And those sixth graders, of course, they're sharp, they're smart, and they kept looking at me and saying, "You don't know what you're doing, do you?" I said, "Well, we'll learn together." And in fairness, they were very kind to me, and we did learn. I mean, we all learned together because I formed supportive groups. The kids started helping each other and helping me, and I got through the year that way. The last part of my job was before I had to leave the building to go to another school to teach kindergarten. But something amazing happened before I left the school. And this is to all those teachers out there that have ever taught, know what I'm talking about, because I got a whole hour off for lunch. Nobody gets that. We all know teachers get like maybe 20 minutes, and that's standing up and they're basically finishing something that they brought yesterday. And so, so that was a luxury. And then I drove to another school and taught kindergarten. So it was kind of a full circle thing. I started out the day in kindergarten and ended the day in kindergarten. And it was pretty fun. It was pretty cool. Now, eventually I did get into a third grade classroom. But I managed to do a good enough job and noticed at the end of that school year, a third grade position opened up. And I did the same thing I did before. I got a resume, I went in, sat down with the principal, and he said, "Oh yeah, you're Dylan's dad." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "And you're River's dad too." And I said, "Yeah, and she's going into first grade," he said. I said, "Yeah, and she's doing really well too." I said, "Yeah," and I got the job. Third grade now. And I taught in that school for over 22 years. And the good news about teaching in the same school and mostly at the same grade level is that you do end up seeing a lot of the same students' families. And so siblings kind of shuttle through your classroom. Now, before I do that, I just do want to tell a little side story about River, who is here today, because she's a special person, of course, because she's a daughter, but she also loves to talk. But she really liked to talk when she was in third grade. And I just love this part of the story because what she would do is she would ride with me to school, and as we all know, teachers have to go there earlier than all the other kids to get ready and so on. And so she'd get up early and ride with me in the car, and on the whole way there, in the car, she'd be chattering away about all the things that we're going to do, and she was going to see in our friends and what they were going to have for lunch and and I'm, it's early in the morning, and I'm not really that cognizant or ebullient or anything. I'm just driving the car, and she gets done doing her chattering away, and we get out of the car and we're walking to the school, and she looks up at me and she says, "You don't talk very much, do you?" I just kind of grunted, and we just kept on going. But as I said, being in the same class, I ended up with siblings. And one family had 3 girls, and their youngest was a boy. And the 3 girls, who all came through my classroom in 3rd grade, all had beautiful African names. And it was almost like a contest, because each year I'd get another one of the siblings, and her name was even more, if it was possible, beautiful than the last. And then the 3rd one came along, and it was just glorious, just wonderful, beautiful names. And it was like they ran out of ideas or they gave up, because their son, Bob. Bob was a cool guy. Bob was what we used to say, never had an unexpressed thought. And that was Bob. So after circle time on the carpet, we were sitting around in the carpet like this kind of thing, and I'm on the carpet too, and we got done with their meeting, and I dismissed them and went back to their desks. And I'm, I had 20 years plus teaching, and I wasn't jumping off the carpet. I was kind of struggling a little bit, slowly getting up, and Bob noticed it, ran to the classroom door and yelled down the hallway, "Teacher down! Teacher down! Hey!" I said, "Okay, Bob." Okay. So I finally get to that, and then later on the day, we're going to have reading time. And I like to read the kids a story every day, and they'd sit on the carpet, and I'd sit in a chair, so I'd be a little elevated, and I could show them all the pictures and stuff. And after the story was over, I often asked them, "Well, what'd you think of the story? Did you like it? What was your predictions? What do you think is going to happen next?" Or, things like that. And Bob has been sitting at my feet the whole time, and he's just been riveted on this, what I thought, the story. He saw everything he watched, everything he was listening very closely, and then he raised his hand. He said, Mr. Wilson, do you have a nose hair clippers? Now, this is probably my favorite story, and it's one of the reasons I named the whole show after this. And I was now teaching 4th grade, and the school district had adopted a new math program, new math curriculum, in which the kids would solve, regular problems like adding, subtracting, etc. And then the additional problem was they had to write, in their own words, how they solved the problem. Okay? And so a lot of kids struggled with this. It was really hard to just, write in their own words what they actually did to an addition or subtraction or division or multiplication problem. And I started getting a kick out of some of their answers. And one student, one boy, he, on the line that, he wrote the wrong answer, first of all. And then on the line where it was supposed to write down how he solved it, he just wrote in all capital letters, I don't know. The favorite answer I got was from a girl, we'll call her Sandy, who, had this problem, 1, 2, 3 plus 1, 2, 3, and she wrote the wrong answer. She wrote 4, 5, 6, and it was something that was just, and it was clear she didn't know what she was doing. But I loved her answer because on the line, in very secretive font, she wrote, I have my ways. As I said before at the beginning, I've taught in a couple of different continents, and for a while I was teaching in an international school in Kobe, Japan. Now, back in the 90s, I taught there, and my wife, my first wife, my son, my daughter, and I attended Kobe Union Church, which was not far from our school. And one day, Pastor Bob beckoned me to the office after services. This is a different Bob. He said, I heard your family is going to Thailand on holiday. And would you do me a favor? Our church collects donations for a leper colony in Thailand every year. Could you do that for us? Could you take this money? And I said, sure. I thought I could, carry a check. That's not a problem. And he was delighted and handed me this white cloth bag. And I noticed it was kind of heavy. Oh, no. And when I looked in, it was full of 10,000 yen notes. And Bob said very proudly, we collected 3 million yen this year. And I went, oh. And I quickly calculated that was about 30,000 US dollars in cash. So I immediately had dark visions of my whole family standing in a dirty alley in Thailand with their hands raised, getting robbed at gunpoint. I'm kind of a nervous traveler. My hands were sweaty, I was a little dizzy. Pastor Bob put a hand on my shoulder and said a prayer. It didn't help. Instead, I made a plan. So there's a few rules about traveling with cash. Never carry too much. Well, that's out the window. Keep it concealed and stash it where it's least expected. Aha! Then I gave up. That was my plan. So what I did was I took all those 10,000 yen notes and I put them in 4 piles, one for each of the family members. The 2 piles for the kids were shorter than the ones for the adults. And I put them in plastic bags, and then I wrapped them in gray duct tape. And they formed kind of a brick. And I realized it kind of looked like drugs. So I got a black magic marker and I put crosses all over. yeah, all over the place. And then I wore loose-fitting pants and stuffed the first Jesus brick down my front. And my wife did the same thing. And then we took the 2 smaller Jesus bricks and stuffed them in the back of the kids' diapers. Because River was about, barely 1, and Dylan was maybe 2, maybe 3. And I figured, okay, nobody will look there. So when we got to the airport, it seemed like everybody in Japan was going to Thailand. And so we found ourselves in a juggernaut, just a log jam of people. And there was a whole bunch of people trying to go through one gate, and I was getting a little nervous. So while we were sitting there, or standing there, I picked up Dylan, I put him in my arms so he could see over the crowd and maybe not be as too bad. And he spit out his pacifier. And I just kind of leaned down, picked up, put it in my pocket. And then I realized why. Because when Dylan used to get hungry, he would start screaming really, really loudly. And he let out a scream, and I saw 300 people all turn their heads and look at where the noise was coming from. And I got a lot more nervous, because we've got all this stuff in our stuff, right? And then to the side, I noticed a hand snaking out, and this happening. This is the Japanese way of going like this. And so this hand is motioning us to go over there. So the four of us go through the crowd and get there and get into this little room. And I'm thinking to myself, this is it. We're going to get deported. They're going to take all the cash. And I'm going to Christian hell for losing all this money. But they had this little table set up, and there was some teapot and some cups and little snackies. And these two women walked up, waving like fangirls at my two kids, going, kawaii, kawaii, which is cute for Japanese. And they took my kids away. And I thought, oh, this is bad. This is really bad. And the other two gentlemen motioned for us to give them our passports, and I carefully took it out of my pants. I didn't want them to see my Jesus bricks, so I pulled out the passport. And when his eyes saw how much I claimed we were carrying, his eyes got really big, and then he just stamped it. And then both kids came back, faces covered in chocolate and looking very happy with themselves. And we were let out another door on the other side of this log jam. Beautiful. And so I that was something that happened that I learned. So when we got on the plane, we got to Thailand, and there, when we got off the plane, we walked out, and there was a man standing there next to a very nice limousine, and they had my name, holding my name up. And he said, well, Bob has a very wealthy friend who wanted to help us get to our destination. So there we were. We got in this nice fancy limo, and I imagine a sign on the side that said "Limo by Jesus," And then we went off to the leper colony. And when we arrived, the director was very happy to see us, and he was smiling brightly until I started digging in my pants. Pulled out the Jesus brick, and he went, oh. And then his face got a little bit different when my wife starts digging in her pants. Fortunately, I managed to change their diapers before we left the airport, because they were still digging out of his back, his tape, And so he stops in the middle of his thing. He's trying to get his Jesus brick out, and he looks over and he sees a basket of cut up mangoes, and he goes. And so they gave him that. He gave him the Jesus brick, and I learned to be a more calmer traveler and trust the kindness of others after that. Except for the fact that later on in the day, I noticed I got pickpocketed. Oh, no. All they got was Dylan's slimy pass.